So today we are moving on to 6.4, which is going to be over the percent equation. If you remember from yesterday, we learned about the percent proportion, which I have written over on the left side of the screen here. So our percent proportion was is over of equals percent over 100. Remember, is and part mean the same thing. They're synonyms. Of and whole mean the same thing. They're synonyms. And so when I'm looking at this percent proportion, I can actually make the percent equation from it. So in order to make this proportion into an equation, the trickiest part is this percentage here. So whenever I have a percent, let's say that I have, I don't know, 54%. When I have 54%, and I take that percentage, so just the number 54, and I divide it by 100, if you remember from 6.1, the decimal that's there just is going to move over 2 places to the left. And that's going to leave us with 0.54. And so our first step to getting the percent equation from this proportion is actually taking these two numbers and dividing them. So the percent that you're given has to be changed into a decimal for this to work. And so I'm just going to call that P. And so whenever we take the percentage divided by 100, that's going to be our P. And then on the left side, I didn't do anything to it. So it still is over of, and then it equals our percent. I don't like having that division there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply both sides by my of, if I can write. So multiply by my of. When I do that, that division goes away, and I'm left with my is equals that percent as the decimal, and I'm going to multiply it by my of. And that is actually our percent equation. The only thing that's a little bit different is we don't use words when we do equations. We use just single variables. And so P is for our percent. And so even though that this is a part, we have to use a different variable than P so we don't get confused. So what I would do with this information is copy down what each of these ones mean. So I'm going to do that now. So A represents our part or our is, P represents our percent as a decimal, and W represents our whole or our of. So when you go to actually solve this equation, you're going to be given a little bit of information. Just like before, just like yesterday, you're going to be given two numbers and then one number that's missing. So you've got three numbers right here. You have two of them. You have to find the third. And so the steps to solving this are you first have to substitute. Substitute. So substitute means we're going to take the numbers that we do have and the numbers that we don't know and plug it into this equation here. And then the only thing that you need to remember is to translate the percentage to a decimal. Because if you don't do that, you're going to get the wrong answer. The second step to solving the percent equation is you're going to just solve for your variable. And so we've done a lot of work over this past year over solving 1 and 2 step equations. And so this is going to be solving a 1-step equation. So you're solving for the missing variable. The last step, number 3, is kind of just a reminder that if you found the percent, you actually found the decimal version of it. decimal. And so if you end up with P equals a number, that's the decimal version of it. And so what you need to do is translate it to a percentage. And so if you do end up solving for P, which you will eventually, you're going to end up with something that looks like P equals 0.34. That's the percentage as the decimal. You need to find the actual percentage. So if you remember from our notes from 6.1, we are taking this number and we're going to multiply it by 100, which actually just moves our decimal over 1, 2. And so my final answer, if I got this answer to a problem, is going to be P equals 34%. So just keep that in mind. If you're solving for a percent, there's a little bit of an extra step that you have to do. But you either have to do that extra step in step number 1 when you are substituting, or you have to do it at the end when you're getting your answer. And so you're always going to have to do something to the percentage, just because of the way the percent equation is written. So that's all the notes that I have for you today. I'm going to go through and solve some problems, but I've given you 2 different ways to solve the same question. So I don't care if you like using the percent equation or the percent proportion better. Just choose your favorite one. Choose the one that makes the most sense to you, that you're going to get the questions right, and solve the problems doing it that way. So if you really enjoy the percent equation or you really enjoy the percent proportion, just pick one and go with it. So I don't care which one it is, just whichever one's your favorite. So I'm going to solve these next 2 problems using our percent equation, and then I will have you guys solve these next 2 problems down here, and you'll check your answer. So if you feel really confident with using the percent equation, might as well pause the video and skip to the end when I have all the answers revealed. All right, so let's talk about example 1. So we are using this percent equation. Remember, this is the part, this is the percent, and this is the whole. So when I'm reading this statement here, I can easily spot out the percentage. We have 38%. And so I'm going to go ahead and circle that because that one's easy to identify. As I'm reading it, I see the word of, and so I know that's going to start something. So of what number? And then I run into the word is, so I'm stopping here. And then I have is 57. And so I've got my 3 numbers written out here. I have my percent, my of, and this is going to end up being an X because we don't know what that number is. And then is 57. And so using that information, I'm going to substitute it into the percent proportion, just like it tells me to do in step number 1. So our part is our is, which is going to be 57. So that's the first number I'm going to write. And then we have an equal sign, and then we're going to follow it with a percent as a decimal. I see this percentage here. It is 38%. 38% as a decimal is going to be 0.38. Because remember, I'm dividing by 100, like how we had to do in our percent proportion, which means we just move over that decimal 1, 2 places. And then there's a multiplication symbol, so I'm going to do a multiplication symbol. So that is actually a multiplication symbol on a computer. I have a longer keyboard, so I don't know where it is on your Chromebook. If you want to, though, you can always use an X. It just gets a little bit confusing because we do use variables a lot. And so if you use an X, it looks like it's a variable X, not a multiplication symbol. So when I'm doing it, I'm going to use this little star. If you can find the little star, I think it might be on the 8 for you. So you're going to have to hold down the shift and then press 8. Anyways, back to the equation. We've got our multiplication symbol. The next variable is going to be our whole. So when we go back here, we've used the percent, we've used the is. Our whole is our of, and it says of what number. And so we don't know what that is. So you can either use the variable x, or you can use the variable w, because that's what we're solving for, is our whole, our w. So I have substituted and I have translated the percentage to a decimal. So I'm good on step number 1. Step number 2 is going to be solving for our missing variable. So whenever I'm solving for a missing variable, I'm always going to start off with drawing a line at my equal sign to split up my equation into 2 parts, because I know if I cross this line, I'm going to have to do the opposite. And so there's nothing to simplify on the left side, but on the right side, I'm seeing multiplication. So I'm going to do the opposite to move it to the other side. The opposite of multiplication is division. And I'm going to divide both sides by the number that is preventing my W from being alone. So 0.38 is making my X not be alone. So that's what I'm going to divide by, because I want to get rid of it. So whatever I do to one side, got to do it to the other. So I'm dividing both sides by 0.38. I'm going to go ahead and get out my calculator, and I'm taking 57 divided by 0.38. And my calculator is telling me that it is 150. And so that's what number is going to go on the left side here, is 150. It is still equal. And then on the right side, we ended up getting rid of that 0.38. So we're left with just a W. And that's going to be our final answer. So I'm going to write it over here. W equals 150. And so that's going to be my final answer. Let's go ahead and work on example number 2. So first thing I like to do is circle my percentage. So I see 17 is what percent of 50. And so our percent for this one, since it's the word percent instead of the symbol percent, that's going to be our X, which leaves our 17 is and our of 50. Now that I have the statement broken up into my 3 different numbers, I'm going to go ahead and use my percent equation. So let's get out text box. We always are going to start out, with our part, which is our is. So A is our is, and is 17. So that's the number I'm going to start off with, 17. And then we follow that with an equal sign. Our next number is our percent as a decimal. Our percent we don't know yet. And so I'm going to leave that as the variable P, because that's what we need to find. It's still multiplication, and we're multiplying by our whole or our of, which in this equation is our 50 over here. I've substituted, but I did not translate the percentage to a decimal because I wasn't given a percentage. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be solving for our missing variable. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a line at my equal sign, and I see multiplication happening to the P, so the opposite of multiplication is going to be division, because I want to get rid of that 50 from my P, because my goal is to get P by itself. So when I divide, I'm going to divide by the number 50, because that's the number that I want to get rid of. And I'm going to do that to both sides of my equation. 50 divided by 50 makes that go away, and I'm going to be left with my variable P. And then on the left side, I'm going to enter that into my calculator. 17 divided by 50. 50 is going to be 0.34. And that's going to equal my variable P. And so just like how I talked about here, if I end up with P equals 0.34, I have to change that percentage or that decimal into a percentage form. So I actually have to do step number 3 for this problem, because we found our percentage, we found the P. And so my final answer for this problem is going to end up being P equals 34%. And that's going to be our answer. So I want you to try problems number 3 and 4 on your own, and then I will give you the answer here in a second. So go ahead and pause your video. And those are your two answers. So for this example 3, you should have gotten A equals 24. So when you substitute those two numbers in, they're going to be your P and your W. And so you're just going to multiply them by each other, and then that's going to be your answer. If you ended up with the answer 2,400, you forgot to change your percentage into a decimal. So make sure you remember to do that in the future. For example number 4, the thing that's a little bit weird about this one is our percentage is over 100. So it's the exact same thing. You're just moving the decimal over twice. And this time, instead of it being like 0.34, it's going to end up being 1.5. And so you're filling out A and P for this one. So 18 divided by 1.5 is going to give you 12. And so those are your 4 answers for these problems. I've got some practice problems up for you to do. Again, I don't care if you use the percent proportion or the percent equation, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. If you have any questions, send me an email.